was born in Bear Valley, May the 17th, 1928.
That makes you 70?
70 years old.
And you were born in what they called the Bear Valley Mine Patch.
Yes,
How old were you when you moved out of there?
7. No, I was younger. And then they moved back in again when I was 7.
And then what happened after that?
Went to school while I lived in there, and then I graduated, and of course, then I moved out to town,
Where did you go to school at?
Higgins Township.
That little school that was in there at that time did no longer exist when you were young?
No, that's where my mom lived in there.
It was
Then
converted.
we moved back in the second time.
Then the school was converted into a home.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another Valley View resident here, and he is
Harvey Lubold, Sr., and I was born in 1921. I'm 77 years old now, and I lived in Bear Valley for 4.5 years before we moved to Valley View. And of course, I spent a lot of time in Bear Valley because my grandparents lived in there. After the schoolhouse was sold and converted into a home, my grandparents lived in this schoolhouse. So we spent a lot of time in there.
Did you have any brothers and sisters while you lived in Bear Valley?
Yes, I had 2 brothers. The oldest one was born in 1919, and the next one was born in 1925.
What were their names?
Albert was the oldest one, and Earl was the next one.
What was your parents' name?
John Lubold, and my mom's name was Ruth Jacobs Lubold.
Was your dad a miner?
Yes,
Did he work down in the shaft or on top side?
in Rock Tunnel,
Where at? Do you know
in
exactly?
the Williamstown Tunnel.
In the Williamstown. Harvey, what about you? Your dad was a miner?
Oh yes, yeah, he worked in there. He worked up at what we called number 1 shaft, which was on the North Mountain. And he worked there for 13 years. And then when they closed that down, that portion of the operation, he moved over to the Williamstown Tunnel and the shafts that were in Bear Valley for the Susquehanna Coal Company, and worked down inside there. I don't know the number of years. I don't know in my time when the colliery shut down, so I can't tell you how many years he might have worked over there.
I think the colliery shut down in 1933. Does that
Well,
seem?
that's what I had thought. It was 1933 when my dad was laid off from in there.
And you still lived in there at that time?
No, we lived in there until I would say after I was born. I was 4.5 years old when we moved out to Valley View. That would be about 1925, 1925 or 1926 when we moved to Valley View, after he had built a home in Valley View. So,
Do you know when the mine patch was built?
no, I have no idea when it was built.
I don't know either.
I just was reading in a book, and it referred to Bear Valley Mine Patch number 1, 2, and 3. Did you ever hear anything like that? Because that's the only community, is that little patch that I know of.
That's the only one, yeah.
What was the houses like?
Like row homes. But, but I understand.
There was just raw boards on the outside?
Yeah.
Yeah, the homes were all built just with rough boards. And most of them were double homes that they had built, 2 sides to each building. And I'm not sure just how many homes were in there. I had made that drawing of them, which I had given to you, you know. And
Yeah.
I think there were 3 double homes were down on the south side of the patch, and my uncle had built a home on the west side of the schoolhouse. On the east side of the schoolhouse, the home that you lived in, was that a single home when you first lived in there, or was that a double?
Well, when I was born,
Yeah.
it was a double home. My grandma
All right.
and grandpa lived in one side, and my mom and dad in the other side.
So that was a double home. Out beyond there was another double
Yeah.
home, and out beyond that one, to the east, was
Yeah.
another double home.
Uh-huh.
And then they tell me, this one I don't remember, there was a single family living out beyond there yet,
Yeah,
in that same area.
yeah.
And then down below there was the home where Lloyd Copenhaver lived.
Yeah, that's what.
Skinny
We
Copenhaver.
lived there yet when we moved back in.
Yeah.
About 34 or 35. We
So
moved back in then
That-
again.
that's
and moved
what I
in the
remember.
schoolhouse.
What were the insides of the buildings like?
just bare walls.
Yeah. The outside boards were the inside, or was there, was the 2x4s covered inside that held the house up? Like-
The schoolhouse that they had made into in living quarters was just boards. It was boards like,
The outside boards, did you see them from the inside, or was there something like sheetrock or something up on the 2x4s, the studs?
they had like a wall, the
Hmm.
outside wall
Okay.
of the schoolhouse, but then all they did to make living quarters was put a partition this way and one this way, and then they had doors to put in.
Were the houses pretty cold in the wintertime?
Oh, especially that schoolhouse, that ceiling was so high,
How did you heat the home?
cool,
Wood or coal burners? Or
coal stoves.
you just cook off the same stove you
Yeah,
heated
yeah.
the place with? What about light inside the house?
Well, when I was I was going to school yet, they didn't have the electric yet in it. And they had kerosene lights.
Is that the way it was when you were in Harvard?
Yes, they still had the kerosene lights in there in the years that I remember.
What about the winters? Were they pretty severe, the way you remember?
1936, we had a bad winter. That time we were snowed in back in Bear Valley for one whole week. We couldn't get out and nobody could get in.
If you were born back there, did the doctor deliver you, or
Yeah,
did the
Dr. Saucer.
Oh yes,
doctor come in?
yeah, the doctors went in there.
The Dr. Saucer. Mom told me I was born on the Ascension Day, that the rest of the neighbors were gone fishing. And it was just her, and my dad, my grandma, and my grandpa Jacobs were the only ones there. The rest were gone fishing. That was a fishing day, and that's when I was born.
The miners that worked in the mine, a lot of them come across the mountain to go to work, or where do they all come from?
Well, some of them traveled in on the road that had vehicles or, horse and buggy, but there were some that came over the mountain and walked back and forth every day.
And all the coal that come up out of Bear Valley went over through the tunnel, in the Williamstown Tunnel to the breaker on that side.
That's where it went. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that was their processing place.
And when you got paid, where did they pay you at?
Over in Williamstown, they had the pay office over there.
How'd you get your pay?
There were times that we walked through the tunnel, went over when payday was, and I went along with my dad that we walked through the tunnel to go over to the pay office in Williamstown to get his pay at the time. And for those people that had vehicles, of course, why they could drive around and drive over to Williamstown and pick it up then.
How many children were in the community when you were little, that you can recall?
Me?
Either one of you.
Well, Harry Newbold had 4, Mum had 3, and Skinny Copenhaver had 11 or 12, I believe.
Yeah, they had.
13, something like that.
What for activities did you play ball or what's the
Nah.
games? Just played games? Was
Yeah.
there a swimming hole in there at all?
Yes, there was. There was a swimming hole to the east side of the mining patch, and that's where we used to go in the summertime for a little dip in the pool.
What about water in the home? Where'd you get your water? Was there a pump there or a well or?
At first, there was a well down at one of the homes down across the field that we used to carry it up to the home. And then the last couple of years, they used to come out here to town and get filled gallon jugs.
That was the well that I had shown to you.
Yeah, I recall
which
that.
Was a dug well,
Okay.
and the only other source was odd beyond the patch, the mining patch where I had showed you. There used to be
Just about a mile.
water trough there, and they used to go out there to get the water to do their washing and so forth. They'd haul it in on their vehicles they had at the time.
Probably took a lot of water to get, I mean,
Yeah,
miners were always needing.
They used to have barrels.
And rainwater to do the washing the clothes.
Yeah.
Catch it in wooden barrels.
Yep,
Oh yes.
yep. Then the mosquitoes used to lay the eggs in them, when you get a bucket full of water out, you see the little wigglers.
What for chores did you have as a child?
Well, we had to help. I had to help Mom. My brothers, they had to help George with the coal truck.
What'd you have to do, Harv?
Well, we lived in Valleyview at the time when I got into being forced in to do some of the chores, and it was mowing lawn and trimming hedges and so forth. And of course, we had a truck patch, and take care of the weeds in the truck patch and dust the potatoes to get rid of the potato bugs. Those
Take
were
the
some of the
ashes out
things.
of the stove and bring coal in.
What was Christmas like for you when you were back in the Bear Valley? Do you recall that?
Well, they didn't believe in giving you presents.
Couldn't afford it probably, huh?
Yes.
Well, even during the Depression years, the money wasn't plentiful, and with the colliery being shut down, and the only other source, of earning money was to get into the independent mining, this bootlegging they used to call it, and get into independent mining and earn a little bit of money that way. And of course, Christmas had come around, and mostly what you got was maybe oranges and peanuts and
Uh-huh.
things to eat, which was more in the line of conserving your money, instead of spending it on a lot of toys or whatever.
Do you recall what your dad's wages were in the mines?
I remember him saying at one time about $5 and some cents. The cents, how many pennies he got out of it, I don't remember, but it was $5 and something a shift he used to get for working in there.
Was that an 8-hour shift at that
That was
time?
an 8-hour shift. Yeah.
What did you have gardens then back there in Bear Valley?
Oh yes, yes. They had different plots for different families, and they had their small garden and grew what they could in the area they had.
I understand there was a store in that area, in the mine patch.
Yeah.
General store, would you say?
Now, I didn't see it, but Mom used to tell me about it. They used to sell cheese and crackers and stuff if you get hungry, like, like after supper or something for a snack. It wasn't nothing to fancy.
They had canned goods and, of course, they had some sweets, candy for the children that wanted to buy and had a little bit of money to buy it. There was no milk in there, so everything was mostly canned goods that they had.
What about bread? Did you bake your own bread?
Most of the people baked their own bread. Now, I don't know whether they sold the flour there or not, that I can't tell you, but most of the people just baked their own bread, baked their own pies and so forth.
Was there any church service in there, or did they come out and go to town to go to church or Sunday school?
I don't know in my time that there was any church services in there at all. The only thing I know is that they could have gone to town when they wanted to go to church.
Is there anything else you want to say about living in that area that you can remember how things were?
Well, I'm Harvey Leupold. I'm 76 years old. I was born in Bear Valley. This is the area where this one-room school once stood. And the other houses were in the background here.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about the school?
The school, the first teacher that I knew was a Morris Coleman, and I think there were 3 other teachers that taught in this schoolhouse throughout the time that the children from Bear Valley went to this school.
How many children were in the school at the time?
At the time, I don't recall.
Just a couple.
Well, the one picture, you know, that I had them on there, we could look at that, and then you could get the number from that. But offhand, I just don't know now.
How did they heat the school?
Pardon?
How did they heat the school in the winter?
They had an old potbelly stove that they used, and the coal was plentiful.
What was the inside of the building like? Wasn't insulated or anything like that?
No, there was no insulation. The building was mostly just, they were rough boards and had strips where the boards were fit together to cover the crack in the boards so that the air could not blow through there.
Was the building painted at all?
Not that I know of. I don't know that it was painted.
And one teacher taught all subjects to all the kids?
Yeah, one teacher taught all the kids, different ages. That's as much as I know about it. I didn't attend the school because we had moved out of here by that time.
And this is the area in this general...
This is the area here where the school stood at one time.
Okay, this is right behind, this is where the school sat right here, and what else was around this area, on this side of the road?
Well, on this side of the road, an uncle of mine had a group of buildings up along the west side of the schoolhouse.
On that flat area there?
Yeah, on that flat area there. And he had a home, a garage. He raised chickens. He had a place there where he had goats in. had a lot of things going, and he was in mechanical, doing mechanical work on different things, fixing cars and so forth. So that was his hobby.
Was there buildings on the east side of the schoolhouse?
On this side, there was a building here. There was another building to the east of that, which was a double home. And then to the east of that one, there was another home there, was a double home. They were all company buildings, all with rough boards, built roughly, but that was for the people that worked at the colliery at that time.
How in the world did they keep from freezing in the bitter winters?
They had to keep the stove going.
Wear long underwear and everything else,
Yeah.
I guess. They didn't have the insulation we have today as far as the clothing
No.
and the boots.
No, and then out at the far side there, that's where my uncle had a home there where he lived in. Was also built by the Susquehanna Coal Company. And he had a little garage which was in the clearing down below the road. And he had a garage in there, that section there.
And this is the main road coming in here.
This is the main road coming in. That's the way it was as far as I can remember. Same place, never changed.
And then right across from the school here, across the road, what was there?
Right across from the road here, that's where the little country store was.
Okay. Okay, this is a picture of the store in those days. What year do you think this would be, probably?
Oh, I would say that was back in the early 20s, and was a little country store. It had a little bit of most everything, not a lot. There was no big inventory, but there weren't that many people living in here at the time. So a little bit of candy for the kids that you could go in there and purchase.
I see they're sitting on the front porch here.
Yeah, they're sitting on the front porch there. The lady is playing a phonograph for the children. It was entertainment for them. And the man on the left here holding the horse was a Morris Coleman, who was a school teacher at that time.
In this school?
In this school.
The horse and buggy days, you can see
Yeah,
that.
the horse and buggy days.
You know the gentleman on the right there?
Not offhand. I have the names, which you can get later on.
Okay.
So,
Of course, there was
of those people.
nothing in the store. It was perishable.
No.
No refrigeration, no electricity
No, it
back
was
there.
all, the food they had was all canned, like canned milk and so forth, you know. There was nothing that was perishable. They had no refrigeration or anything.
How often would they bring a load of groceries in to stock the store?
Well, that I couldn't tell you because I hadn't spent that much time in here, you know, while the store was, while they were running the store. I didn't spend that much time in here.
Take her down. Okay, this store we just looked at sat right there in that area right there.
Yep.
Right the side of the road.
Right alongside of the road.
Okay, here's a sketch that Mr. Loophole made of this general area here where we're standing. What are some of these buildings? Where's the schoolhouse located?
The schoolhouse is right here. These were the buildings where an uncle of mine, Uncle Harry Loophole, lived. And this is a building where John Loophole lived. This is a building where the Westerners lived at one time. And this is a building where I think the Arches had lived in there. This is a building where Lloyd Kuppenhaver had lived in. This is the little country store. And these are buildings where different people had lived in at different times, which were on the east side where the road passed behind the buildings, which went over to number 1 shaft.
What's that in the middle, though, the rectangular figures there? Up there, plots or something there, a garden?
These are garden plots that they had in the open area below here where the people had their own gardens, which they put out for the different parties that lived in the different homes.
Vegetables for their
And
homes.
this was a little garage here. These were, of course, were the outhouses, and these were garages that the people had.
These are all company homes.
These are all company homes.
Did
yep.
they pay to build the schoolhouse, too, and the store?
That I couldn't tell you. I know the people that had the store and ran the store were Arts. The name was Arts here. And I lived in here for 4.5 years. And my dad built a home in Valley View, but I spent a lot of time in here because my dad bought the schoolhouse and my grandparents lived in the schoolhouse. So I used to come in here evenings along with the bus, spend time with my grandparents, my dad and my mother, come in later and
pick me up, and we go back to Valley View again. Weekends, we'd come in here at times, and we'd spend times walking up to the colliery and walking around up at the colliery and seeing what's going on up there. Spent time up there in a little swimming pool they had up there. It was a pool that they had for water source for their boiler, and we spent time up there and go swimming in this little pool at times. So we spent quite a bit of time in here.
What for games would you children play when you're in here?
Well, the games we played years ago was marbles and of course baseball and softball and so forth. Used to use a sponge ball, rubber ball. Those were some of the games we played.
What about the winters? Do you remember anything about harsh winters or anything?
No, I don't. No, I don't remember much about the winters.
How about deer situation? There are animals
Well,
in
at
here.
that time, why, you didn't see many deer. What we saw mostly when we'd come in here at times during the summer, you saw snakes. We saw rattlesnakes. You saw black snakes, and of course that was about the extent of it. Never saw any deer in my time that I know of until later years.
What about the water? Where'd they get their water for these homes?
They had wells which were in back of some of the homes in the lower end of the patch here, and if the wells got dry, they had a source of water about 2 miles out the road.
East.
There was water came down off the mountain. They had a pipe in. They had barrels there, and they used to collect this water in barrels. If they needed water, they'd run out there and pick some up in different barrels.
Is that behind you? You're talking where the water comes down.
That's to the east of the town here, when
Okay.
the town was here.
How deep were these wells that they had behind the houses?
They weren't very big wells, you know. They were small, just dug wells. The one party that lived in the lower house, where it went over to the tunnel, they had dug a well. Now that's about 25, 30 foot deep, which is still here at the time. The Game Commission, when they came in here, the game protectors went up to the ash bank and they brought a big chunk of red ash down and they set it on top of the well so nothing or nobody would fall into it.
Where's that located now?
Well, that's to the south of here. Now I can take you there and show you where it is.
Okay.
So, well, this is where they used to cultivate the land, and the parties that lived in the homes, here's where they had their little gardens in here. And then over in here is where the houses were built. They came down along where the road goes over to the shaft. And the last house had been built right in here, and there were that Jungle Red Ash is. That's the well that the people from that lived in the last house had built that, or dug that well for water.
And you said how deep was it?
It looks to be about 25 or 30 foot deep.
Is it stone lined?
They have cement.
Cement.
It's cemented. Mm-hmm. You can walk there and take a look.
This is the well we just looked at from a distance, and you can see when the Game Commission got it, they put this big chunk of red ash on here to keep anybody from falling down in it because it wasn't covered. But you can see down there, if you had a flashlight, you'd be able to see down in there.
You can see over here.
There is water down there.
Yeah, you can see a little farther on this side.
You can see the reflection of the
Mm-hmm.
water down there. It looks like it's down there about 20 feet, the water level. What do you think drained some of these wells? The mines underneath that the water left, or?
No, I don't think so. I think what happened was, you know, during the summer and the dry weather, and the wells they had behind the houses was mostly only water that seeped out of the ground, and during the summer when it got dry, they dried up, you know, the source dried up.
Was the water in the stream in the Bear Creek here any good in the summer? I mean, in those days, it wasn't, was it?
I would think at that time, that water was fairly good in the stream.
Do you recall any fish being in it?
Years ago, there used to be, I don't know whether they were small brook trout or what, there used to be small fish in the stream years ago.
Okay.
And we'd walk along it and see small fish in it, but later on with the sulfur getting into it, why, there was nothing in them anymore.
Okay, this is where the village sat now. From here, where were the mines at?
From here, number 1 shaft is to the south here. Number 2 shaft is to the northwest here.
Approximately how far from here are they?
Well, the tunnel and number 1 shaft are over here. I would say that's about a mile. And I would say same distance from here to get to where number 2 shaft is. It's about a mile. Okay, the buildings that I remember had no basement under them. They were just set on a small foundation. The schoolhouse had a basement. That's the only one that I remember that had a basement to it. The others were just sitting on a small foundation.
What was down in the basement?
I couldn't tell you what was in the basement in the schoolhouse. I don't know that I ever was down there in my time. So,
What did they call this little village here, Bear Valley?
Bear Valley. That's the name that I often heard, and the only one I often heard, and it's still Bear Valley to us.
Okay, we're just about back at where the shaft was. What's all these big rocks or whatever behind you here?
Well, this is the red ash, which is the residue from the coal they burned in the boiler houses for their steam, which they had. I think they used to hoist with steam at first, and then later on, they used it in their boiler house for the hot water, for the shifting house they had, for the miners, which could change their clothing and take a shower.
Just big chunks of ash.
Just big chunks of ash. It was hot when they brought it down here, and some of it just burned itself together, and that's why you see all the big chunks. It just molded together. This is the number 2 shaft. You see the scaffolding and the shift wheels. You can see the hoist building in the background, and to the left of the scaffolding you see the building which was the boiler house and the shifting shanty for the miners.
Okay, this is how it looked then, and here's how it looks today.
Yeah, this is how it looks today.
There's the brick building that we just looked at. That was, what was that building?
That was the hoist building. That's where they had the hoist engine in and the big drum which wound the cable on. And over here where this mound is, of course, well, that's where the shaft had been at one time.
Okay, there's the area where
All
the,
filled in there.
where the wooden scaffolding was we just looked at.
That's where the wooden scaffolding was. There's some of the piers are still standing up here where the heavy wood was fastened on into with metal plates to hold the scaffolding in place.
Again, we're right on the road here, right, the main road coming in here.
This has
Comes
been,
right to,
as far as I know, this has always been the main road coming in.
coming
here.
in here. Okay, let's go up above and look things over up there.
All right.
Okay, this is the engine house. You can see the date.
Yeah, this is the engine house which they had for number 2 shaft.
1923, I think that reads.
That's what I think it is. It's 1923. And they had 2 cages which they could run in here. Up and down the shaft.
And one engine.
Had one engine, that's all I know of. One engine, one large drum they had in here to wind the cable on that I had seen in my time.
There's one of the piers that anchored the wooden framework to the shaft, the scaffolding that, where the shaft went down in. 1913 is the date etched on that. There's one of the piers. There's another one. And right in that general area, right in there, about 25, 30 feet where the hole was, where the shaft went down through. And directly behind me is where the engine house sits. There you can see a date in the cement there, 1916. What was this building?
This was the building where they had the shifting shanty and the showers for the miners who wanted to change their clothing and get a shower. And to the east end of this is where the boiler house was that they used for their hot water. And at one time, I think it was for steam. When they first started here, I think they used steam engines to operate the hoist that they had for the shaft.
There's a big steam engine, in other
They
words.
must have had a steam engine at first until they got the electricity in here.
Okay, this shanty here is north of where the shaft went down about, oh, what do you say, maybe about 75 feet, 80 feet, pretty close to it.
Yeah, I would say so.
And then over in the easterly direction, right over there, sat the engine house. Over there, that's it, located. If you look over here to the right now, where the shaft was originally, you can see they got somewhat of a sinkhole there right at the present day. It's eroded down with all the rain and over the years and everything, moisture, snow and everything melting. Eventually it washes dirt down through and finds an opening, and you got an opening right there now. I don't know how deep it is, and I don't care to go up and see. Okay, right now the shaft is right behind me, but what were you just telling me a while ago?
When I came in here on a weekend when I was a young boy, in the early morning, before it was just getting light, my dad and I would walk out and we'd watch up along the mountain to see his relief coming. You'd see the light bobbing down along the old miner's path, people coming from Spring Glen to work over here in Bear Valley.
They come over the mountain, how to walk over the mountain to
They
get to work.
From Spring Glen up over the mountain and down this mountain to get in here to work.
They had a day's work in that, just getting here.
They did. Yeah, they did. Yeah, but they put the hours in.
And it was dark when they come in and dark when they went home, probably.
Probably till they got home it was dark again.
Here we're north of where the shaft was. What's this foundation here?
This was the foundation where the motor was in and a fan for the ventilation of the inside of the mine.
One huge fan that blew air down in the hole over there behind you, right?
I think it drew through and drew the air up here.
Okay.
I think that's how it works. Probably from the shaft and from other openings, you know.
Then this is a fan that sucked the
Yeah.
air out instead of blowing into it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the building sat right there, and right over here is a rectangular or square cement area that goes down there, probably about 40 feet. And then they had a tunnel leading from that went into the mines that enabled them to draw the bad air out of the mines.
They used to have a backtrack here where they kept the empty cars, and they also pushed the loaded cars to the back here till they had enough that they could take them with the motor. They had a track around the back which went around in a circle in the back here and went over to number 2 shaft and or the number 1 shaft and took them through the tunnel over to Williamstown to be processed in the breaker.
Is that how they got the coal out of this valley here?
That's how they got the coal from number 2 here and took them over to Williamstown through the tunnel over to where the breaker was.
Because we're standing right here, and the shaft is behind me, and here's the engine house. And they bring the loaded cars up and run them out of track out behind you, right?
That's right.
So they got enough to make it
Well, they
worthwhile.
had enough that they brought enough of them up to make a trip to go around and take them through the tunnel and over to the breaker to be processed. The piers you see out there is the pier that supported their lines, their water lines, which they had coming down to a small dam they had in there for their water source, for their boiler, to create their steam and also their hot water for their bathing in the shower room up there.
Was it a pond there, or what was there?
Yeah, they had a little bit of a pond cemented in there. They had a cement foundation around it and cemented in for a pool of water there.
Did you go swimming in that?
Oh yes, we used to go swimming in that.
Did they allow that, or?
We'd be in here on a Sunday when there was no one here,
Oh.
and then we'd take a little dip in the pool in the summertime.
Cool off, huh?
Yes.
Okay, up here's where the shaft was, and we talked a little earlier about the cars that they bring out of the shaft, run them back on a rail behind the engine house right there until they had enough that they'd circle around the shaft, and bring them down this general direction here.
This is where the rail bed was, when they brought the cars down and took them over to the tunnel to take them through the tunnel over to Williamstown for processing in the breaker.
Okay, this is the area here, the road bed that they had the track on. It took over through to the south side of the valley here to the tunnel that went over into Williamstown. Okay, here we're in amongst this ash pile. You can see the big clinkers, the big cinders that were in here. Looks like a lot of them were taken away. Is that true?
Yeah, this is part of the red ash. They used to use it, people come in here and pick it up with their trucks and whatever, and they used to use it in the towns to fix up the alleys and fill in wherever they needed to with red ash years ago. You know, we hadn't no macadam alleys or anything at that time, so they used red ash. It was readily available here.
Plenty of it.
Yep. This is part of the rail bed where they took the cars over to a number 1 shaft and through the tunnel over to Williamstown to be processed in the breaker.
This is about in the middle of the valley here between the two mountains where we're at right now.
This is the coal they took out of number 2 shaft, and they transported it over here and through the tunnel.
You can see that across the valley here, they had to build this up for the railroad, the bed of the rails where they hauled the coal through. So there's a lot of work involved in putting it across here. Took a lot of fill.
That's the foundation where they had a fan for the ventilation of the veins down inside the mine. And this is where the opening came up at one time.
This fan was for what shaft?
Draw the air out of the mine and keep it ventilated.
For number what shaft?
Number 1.
Number 1 shaft.
Yeah,
We're on the
1 shaft.
on the south side of the Bear Valley here at number 1.
Yeah, this is the north end of the tunnel that went from Bear Valley to Williamstown. And the stones were all cut in a very similar shape to line the walls, also to line the archway that was for the tunnel. And they were all angled to make the arch a perfect arch.
It's hard to imagine people sitting on a rock pile cutting these stones. They're cut so perfect. But it's lined here on the way in on the left side, and also you say on the right side it was lined?
At one time that was lined also.
But the game commissioner went and bulldozed this shut so you couldn't get in because it had been open.
Yes, it had been open at one time for quite a few years.
But even the stones in the arch in the roof were cut stones all the way.
They were all cut stones. They were all cut in the wedge shape to fashion the arch. It was a beautiful job. You wonder how the people did that kind of work years ago with what tools they only had.
Yeah. What do you think these miners got paid in here? What'd your dad get?
Well, the one time that I know per shift when he worked up at number 2 was $5 and some cents per shift. And that's about the only amount I know that I heard at one time or another.
Okay, those company homes that you lived in, did
That
they?
was company built homes. It was on company land. And the people, if they build anything on their own, they only owned the building. They did not own the land where the building was on.
The company houses, did they pay rent for them?
They paid a small amount of rent to live in those houses.
And that wasn't no company store that was over there? That was privately owned?
That was private. The people that had it, the archers that had it, ran that privately and supplied the foodstuffs that they did sell there.
Here's where the tunnel entrance is, and on the right side here, west of the tunnel. What's that framework or building up there?
The building that they have here used to be their shifting shanty and a place to hang their clothing, a place to get a shower and change clothing before they went home.
You see they framed or put forms around here and cemented these. These are all cement walls
Yep,
with the openings for the door and the window. I'll go inside and look at it a little bit. Here's the east side of it. You can see some windows here. This looked like it might have been This ain't the shower part here, I don't think. Could have been, I don't know. There's a little room divided. Over here's a bigger room. This is the bigger part of it. I'm on the west end of it. Perhaps this was the shower area, I don't know. But you can see how they made this. They have cables inside the concrete to reinforce it. Of course, all they had to do then was put the roof on. The floor's already cemented then. Here's the shanty where they took the showers, a little bit west of the north entrance of the Williamstown Tunnel. Now what's up this way?
Now this was an incline, and they had rails here, which they could use to transport cars from up at the top of the shaft, up or down, whichever way they need to take anything. This is where number one shaft was at one time, and they had a scaffolding with 4 shift wheels. They had 4 buildings with hoist engines, and the shaft had 4 different sections in it for cages, which they could move up and down with the different buildings they had here and the engines in them.
There's one at the north that's behind you there. There was an engine house.
There was one to the north, one to the east, one to the west, and there's one up in the south mountain here.
Okay, this is at the east end here. There you can see the one at the west end. The brick walls of some of it's still standing.
That's the only thing I remember. It was no metal scaffolding. It was all wood scaffolding they had.
Okay, here's the other engine house on the south end here, but here you can see some huge concrete abutments here where they bolted the legs to the wooden scaffolding that stood over top of the shaft itself. Here's a little brick building with a cement floor and a cement roof on it. We don't know exactly what they were. There's one here, and there's one east of here on the other side of the engine house. We're standing about in the middle of the engine house. This is all concrete. You can see how it was constructed, and this is on the south end of the shaft here. How do you think this was laid out here?
Well, this was deepened here so that the drum which they used to wrap the cable on, which were very large, had space down into here because they were so big they had to have a lot of space, you know, and that's why this cement is lowered inside the building here to take care of the size of the drums they use.
And they wound all the cable on there that went up and down
On those
in the
cages,
shaft,
you know, into the shaft.
because it took maybe 1,600 feet of cable to reach the bottom.
If it was that deep, yeah.
Because the one at the Bear Gap, that was 1,640 feet
Well,
deep.
I think this was the same here. They might have had the same level here, you know, that they had down there, you know.
Yeah. Look at those hand-cut rocks there behind. Man, them are huge. They probably just went up back here where all these rocks are and started working on them until they squared them up and moved them into place there. But they are heavy. Probably a lot of smashed fingers in the process of doing that. Here I'm looking down into this engine house. You can see how it was constructed. A lot of concrete to make it. This is the engine house that sat on the western part of the shaft. Not as elaborately made as the one we just looked at. A lot of work went into making a building of this type. This is looking at it from the front end of it. Shaft is now behind me. This is the engine house that sat north of the shaft. And if you look over here, you can see on this side is where this concrete area is, where the legs of the foundation of the shaft scaffolding was bolted down into here. Here's the north engine house. You can see that area there is where the cables come out through. This foundation here is where the engine house sat on the east side. Just pan around here. There's the one on the north. And right on that flat area there is where the shaft went down through. On the far side, you can see the other engine house on the west. We swing back up here in the wooded area, is where the big one was on the south end. Okay, out in that direction there was the entrance to the Williamstown Tunnel. And around here behind me is where the shaft went down in this area here. Now, how did they get the coal? What did they do with the coal when they got it out of that shaft?
They had a place opened up down inside that when they brought the coal cars up, they could line them up on the rails in there, and then they could pick them up with the motor, and it was all underground. Take them out, take them through the tunnel over to Williamstown to be processed in the breaker.
In around behind you, underground there, they had
That was
another
all
tunnel.
underground, and it was a big area inside there where they could take the cars off as the engineers brought them up on the cages through the shaft.
You say you were down to see that?
I had seen that when I was a young boy, that I had walked in there with my father, and I saw this large opening, and he showed me where they brought the cars up out of the shaft and lined them up in there, and then from there they hooked them up onto the motor and took them through the tunnel over to Williamstown.
That's amazing.
It sure is.
We're back here at the entrance to the north entrance to the Williamstown Tunnel again. What were you saying a while ago about?
I came along in here at one time. I do not remember how old I was, but I was a young boy. And my dad was on his way over to Williamstown to the pay office to pick up his pay, and I went along and walked through this tunnel. And as far as I have found out from different people, the tunnel is approximately 1 mile long.
It does run at a slight angle, about a 40, not quite a 45-degree angle from this side to the other side, heading southwest. But I don't know, I'll have to look on the map to really get the distance. But is it level all the way through?
It is level all the way through. Easy walking, and there were always lights along the way. It was always illuminated. You could see where you were walking.
Was there water in there draining?
There was a drainage ditch along the side. You did not have to walk in water. And at times, if you were fortunate enough, and one of their motors came along while this was still working, you could get a ride.
Was there gangways or tunnels off of this then?
There were tunnels were worked off of the tunnel here, and the inside here, there was a large area had been opened up where they used to drop the coal cars off at one time. When they came up with the cage, they dropped them off on the inside of the mountain and lined them up to be taken over to the breaker over in Williamstown.
You ever see any rats or anything in there?
No, never saw any.
No rats.
Never saw any rats.
Was it nice and cool in the summer,
Oh,
I'd
it was
imagine?
cool. The temperature was always nice. In the summertime, it was nice and cool to walk through there. The road from the small mining patch came in behind the houses and came back through here, and back here is where they had their parking area for the people that came in here to work.
I've got a question for you. I always observed the fact that the miner's lunch bucket was round. Is there a reason for that?
I don't know that there's a reason for it. I think that was the shape of their buckets until later on they came up with another idea. And later on, I remember they used to have a bucket. It was a rectangular type of bucket, and it had a top to it that held the water that they used to take along in for their drinking.
That fit right inside of it?
It right inside the bucket, and it was all a compact lunch can.
They also had a water bottle.
They had a water bottle at one time that was shaped like a cone, and some of them were made out of copper, some of them were regular steel, and they carried those inside the mine for their water source, for their drinking water.
I want to thank you for the tour you just gave us here in Bear Valley. Gave us a tour of the settlement here, the mining settlement, and also the mining industry that was in here. So we appreciate your time and effort in showing us around here.
Well, I'm glad I could do this, that some people are interested in what this was at one time. So you're welcome to it.
If we don't record this, nobody's going to know it in the future.
That's for sure.
So again, we thank you.
And there are a lot of people that are interested that never knew about this, and they see this in the paper, and they marvel about the things that they didn't know about.
You're right. I would have never known it if my buddy hadn't given me the newspaper with it in.
Good.
So I seen the names on the paper, and I picked yours out and gave you a call, and that's how we got together here to do this.
I'm glad I could do it. So you're quite welcome for my time. This was an area here where they used to have a water source that came